to Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV, brought to you by the Center for Constitutional Governance. I am Isaac Kwagala, your host. Today's conversation explores three salient topical developments. We start at home in Kampala, where the business community continues to reel from significant losses occasioned by floods in downtown Kampala on account of the businessman Hamis Chigundu's redevelopment of Nakivubo channel. We discuss what this means for the country in terms of the environmental protection, but also the wider governance question. We cross over to Tanzania, where the Chama cha Mapinduzi Independence Party has faced a significant challenge to its grip on power, occasioned by protests following a disputed electoral contest, which was largely boycotted by the major opposition parties. And finally, we go to the United States, where a 34-year-old Zohran Mamdan, a politician with active Ugandan roots, has shot up to the pinnacle of America's largest city, New York, leadership. And we discuss what this means for the geopolitics of the world, but more specifically, the Uganda's bilateral relations with the United States. I am now joined by an esteemed panel of personalities to help us make a sense of this topic. To introduce them, I start from my immediate left is Professor Mwambutsya Ndebesa, a regular on this program, a distinguished historian, and a social commentator. Professor, it's a pleasure to have you today. Say hello to the viewers.
Good morning to the viewers and the morning dear panelists here. I am glad to be here to discuss those issues of national and global significance today.
Many thanks, Professor, for joining us. Next to Professor is Ms. Charity Ahimbisibwe, the Executive Director of the Electoral Laws Institute. She's a governance specialist. It's a pleasure to have you, Charity. Say hello to the viewers.
Thank you, Isaac. A very good morning to all our viewers, and good morning to our fellow panelists. I'm happy to be here to think through those three topics that you put across.
We are pleased to have you. And of course, last but not least, is also quite a mainstay on the program, Mr. Talwana Ernest, who is a lawyer and a social commentator. Ernest, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. Say hello to the viewers.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning to all Ugandans and people watching from across the world. I'm glad to be on the show, and I'm glad to be able to discuss topics of interest with the panelists.
Always a pleasure. Let me start with you, Charity, since you are the governance specialist and expert on the program. And let us begin with matters governance and environment, the intersection, and put into sharp focus the Nakivubo channel saga and the floods, the significant losses to the business community, but also the aspect of procedural impropriety with regards to the donation of public land to private development. So I want to ask the question because I am certain you've been monitoring the events, the flow of correspondence between the various stakeholders, all this shrouded in mystery. But what are the real implications of this saga in terms of the governance question for the country?
So, Nakivubo, and my heart, I want to start at the point of saying my heart goes out to all business people, people who have lost their products this week in billions, and they were taxpayers, they were paying tens of millions. I've seen 3, 4 different TikTok videos of where a woman said she was paying 20 million in taxes, another one said she was paying 10, another one said she was paying 18 million in taxes, but all her business sank, and the others as well. And government came out to say, look, we are going to compensate you, but how much can they compensate? And how many business people can they compensate? That's a question for another day. And I think after the Prime Minister visiting the scene, she was overwhelmed by the numbers, by the amount of loss, and if they had to compensate, what it meant. So then came the executive director of Kampala Capital City Authority, who said, no, we are now studying the situation to assess the level of loss and then determine the level of compensation. And that then angered the traders, who some decided to take to the streets, started shouting. Yesterday there was a bit of altercation downtown, I think between about 5 p.m. to about 7, there was a lot of altercation. People were upset about what had happened. But back to the beginning of the story. So the president issued a letter, a directive, and said there was a godly project that was going to be run by a one-harm Chigundu. And that would not have been the problem, because the president is a politician and he always sends out political directives. I have seen him sending directives to the Minister of Finance, and the Minister of Finance says, no, for this one I have refused, it's not going to work. Because if we do it, this is going to happen, and the president has accepted. So the president issued that directive and then asked the Prime Minister, who is Robina Nabanja, to oversee whether that directive would work or not work. And of course, I think Nabanja, for her, because it is order from above, she just went with it full blast.
Wait a minute, Charity. Was that the wording of the text? Was it supposed to be discretionary for her to review whether it's feasible or not?
No, the wording of the text does not give her that discretion, but she sits in that office. Why did he send the letter to the Prime Minister? Why didn't he give the letter to Ham and say, now you have a blanket, proceed on my letter? Why did it have to go to the Prime Minister? Think about it. So it didn't need to be blanket. It needed to be go study. You see, now you're talking about a governance issue. When we talk governance in this country, one of the things which have killed Uganda, and I re-emphasize, is failure for us to allow institutions to work. We think that we will do what we want to do. We will achieve it the way we think we want to achieve it, simply because of impunity. Because we think we have connection to the president. I would walk to the president and tell him, you know what, President Museveni, do you see the other land which is in Katakwi? Yes, that land there now, if you gave it to me tomorrow, you'll find a factory which is going to produce this and the other. And he says, fantastic, that's a very good plan. Go ahead with it. Because for him, if he hears something which he thinks is investment, is development, he just jumps onto it. He was given a plan where he thought this is going to work miracles for Kampala, and they gave him a good drawing. He saw a fantastic building. He saw everything very fantastic. He thought, wow, if I saw this happening in Kampala tomorrow, I'll be excited. So he passes the thing onto a technocrat. The technocrat was supposed to work with the engineers in Kampala, and the engineers have released the letter which they issued. The letter was to the effect, no project should take place until an environment impact assessment is done. And why the engineers were insisting on an environment impact assessment is because of the following. An environment impact assessment analyzes the risk. They start and build a channel, like a scenario building. They build a channel, they assess, they say the water will come, it will be to this level, it will destroy this amount of things, and this is how we revert in case this happens. That is the essence of the environment impact assessment. That impact assessment actually builds the scenario of the worst case scenario in terms of water, if water has no passage. But that is not the only problem. Nakivubo is not the only problem. Lubigi is a problem. Lubigi has no drainage on it. Kampala is going to sink one of these days because we are seated on a time bomb. Everywhere, you notice even the way our roads have been dug. And whenever it rains, you can't drive your car nowhere. Not even the ones who have Land Cruiser, VX, V8. They can't drive, they are stuck.
Charity, legal experts have described this act as one of gross negligence.
It is.
Who do you think should bear responsibility, criminal or otherwise?
First, the people to bear the responsibility is NEMA. NEMA is a statutory body that is established to ensure environmental standards are maintained and kept even when development is taking place. That is the first place of liability. The National Environment Act is an act that squarely puts the threshold of every environmental disaster on the shoulders of NEMA. The second people who are liable is this Kampala Capital City Authority. The establishment of that Kampala Capital City Authority was to ensure it's also a statutory body. Every statutory body is accountable by law. It is established under the Kampala Capital City Authority Act. The moment you are established by an act, you are liable. Because the act places a duty. Now, every time there is a breach of that duty, it is you that is liable. So those two bodies are the first two that hold liability. And whoever leads those two bodies is liable. Number three, that engineering body under the Ministry of Works is also a statutory body that is mandated to work along these two.
But it blew the whistle.
It did, but in terms of technicality, do you only stop at blowing a whistle?
Have you absolved the developer, Mr. Ernest Talwana?
Oh, of course, liability is first to him. In terms of negligence, if we talk about negligence in law, there is a judge who lays it out very well. He's called Lord Denning. He said that you owe your neighbor a responsibility of care, that the law imposes a duty of care on you first as an individual to your neighbor. And your neighbor is a person who may suffer acts of omission or commission from you, the tortfeasor. So that man is liable, like 100% very liable. Why was he taking that plan in the first place? What was he talking about? Why did he even go there saying, I'm going to develop this place without having carried out any kind of assessment of that Nakivubo channel? And why wasn't he listening to the engineers? Why wasn't he listening to the Lord Mayor? Why wasn't he listening to KCCA? Why wasn't he listening to the engineering body of the Ministry of Works? Now, we have seen that in the medical profession, if the president, for example, said Mulago Hospital has to be shut down for let's say 2 years or 1 year to undertake development, and he sends the letter to the head of Mulago, would the head of Mulago blanketly close Mulago? Would it be possible that the head of Mulago would say, the president has ordered, we are closing Mulago for 2 years to undertake development? Why? Because he knows the moment Mulago is closed, the number of deaths he will suffer will not be accountable. So he will reject that proposal. And this is what happened in the city. So the engineers should have even gone to the street the very first day that Ham started developing that place.
Thank you, Charity, for your insights. Professor, let me come to you. This is a very distressing topic to discuss, given the reality on the ground. So much loss in monstrous proportions to the business community. But I want to ask you, is this mode of development sustainable? Because the idea was, let us identify a private developer whom the president has described as having proposed the godly idea of redeveloping and beautifying the channel. Let him partner with government institutions, have him supported, and then let us have this project executed. Is this model of development sustainable for the country?
The issues of Nakivubo channel question are very complicated because, you know, in this country, in the history of this country, some parts of this country, we had the rulers called the demigods, the Bachwezi. And when you bring issues of mundane world into the other world and you start saying the project is godly, then it is very hard to challenge the project. I think you see the dilemma that has evolved out of that. I think the natural question has put some shining on the problem of governance of the patronage system of governance. It is very complicated. This is a patronage governance system where institutions are not working, as my friend here has pointed out. And I think Mamdan has published a book last month saying that this is slow poison. This is the case of slow poison. The slow poison of killing, this time institutions, of course, in turn, which will kill people. This is what is happening. Because from nowhere, a letter is written instructing the Prime Minister, who is not a technical person. She doesn't, but she was, I think the letter, contrary to what Charity is saying, the letter was telling the Prime Minister to oversee the implementation, not to make further consultations even. Because when the technical people at the KCC raised the issue, I think we have to appreciate those technical people, not necessarily to blame them, because I remember they wanted to go there. And before they went there, the place was cordoned off. There were even soldiers who stopped these cases and the Kwagos to go there. And the place was cordoned off. And therefore, this was a no-go area. It was an area which was not supposed to be interfered with, if you can call it interference, of these other technical people, whether they are engineers or KCC or whatever. Remember, when things come from the president, contrary to the argument of Charity here, one time, I remember, the permanent secretary is the topmost technical person in the ministry, isn't it? The permanent secretary and minister of education commented on UPE. And one time, the president was furious. He said, "This is my project, it's not yours." And sooner than later, the permanent secretary had to be shuffled from Minister of Education. One time, the big man governor, Mutevire, the late, may his soul rest in peace, told members of parliament when they were asking him about how money was used without, I think that was the money from oil, was used without proper procedures. Tumsime Mutevire, in his characteristic point blank, he told them, the members of parliament, "But don't you know who ordered that one? You go and ask him." "Why are you asking me? You go and ask him." And the members of parliament,
shut up.
Shut up. What would the poor KCC engineers or technocrats would have done when in this deep state, I call it even a deep state, I think Hamis Chigund has joined the deep state. Hamis Chigund goes to Nakivubo and throws around his weight. He has got even, I'm told, the chief people, but he's reinforced by SFC.
The state.
The state. So what would they have done? Even as we talk, the Prime Minister has visited the place and has not stopped the construction to go on. She has said the construction should go on. Only that you need to put in more channels to bring in more water. You have to add on that. But that natural channel is a gigantic project. I do not think that Hamis Chigund has the technical capacity the financial capacity and even the moral capacity. Because Chigundu has been involved in such a shoddy deals, in such a behind the scenes deals. He should not be let to work on a giant project like Nakivubo channel that can sink the whole of downtown Kampala. In my considered view, which may not be so technical, if you don't use hydraulic engineers, water engineers, to first test that place, if you don't even consult engineers who know something about earthquakes, if you construct those structures on that channel, and for some reason even there is an earthquake, and those buildings fall in that channel, and that night it rains, the whole of downtown Kampala will be flooded, and we shall lose billions of property and lives. So it needed time to think about it, and even looking at the financial capacity. Me, I look at that channel in my considered view that it needs in terms of billions of dollars, maybe trillions of shillings, to construct that channel, to construct on that channel something that can last a test of time. But all that was thrown overboard. It was a godly project. It went beyond the realm of human beings. And that is how this project clearly shows how slowly institutions have been destroyed in this country.
Yes.
I mean, you don't consult NEMA. You were almost blaming NEMA that they are accountable. How?
They are.
NEMA gave their opinion that the construction should not go on. But you can't stop Chigundu with his godly plan.
Let them come to court and tell us.
These kind of courts of yours. And do what? And stop President Museveni. When the courts came up with that ruling of
UPDF.
The UPDF and the court martial, the president.
That is the UPDF Act.
Yes.
And Ugandans should not appear before court martial.
No, before the UPDF Act, where the judges gave a ruling.
It was on the same.
It's on the same basis.
On the same basis. Yeah, the president and his son said Uganda is not for the judges. You mean you didn't hear that? You didn't read that? That
very unfortunate.
That Uganda is not for judges. So how would this poor judge now give is it a caveat or the order to stop Chigundu when the directive came from the president going to the prime minister who says she is Kamara Biona, and when she's in Nakivubo nobody else should guide her. Then what would you have done? So anyway, to conclude here, I'm saying that this is a manifestation, this is a reflection of the death of institutions. How institutions should work, because ideally, yes, I think maybe we could do something about Nakivubo channel and do maybe that proposal of Chigundu. Maybe it was a good proposal, not godly, of course, definitely. Definitely not godly. I don't believe in that.
You're defying the president.
No. But if I met my president, I would tell him that is not a godly project. So you see, the interest of Chigundu is profit. The interest of Chigundu is profit. The interest of citizens is safety.
Yes.
So what should have been done was to ask the powers that be to consult and make sure that Chigundu comes up with a proposal which shows capacity, engineering capacity, that shows financial capacity, that shows legal capacity, legal procedures, because even that land is public land. So how is Chigundu building on that public land, and how is public land given out to individuals in this Republic of Uganda?
Thank you, Professor, for your reflections.
But Isaac, sorry, the letter is here, and this is why I said the president was carried away. See what he was told. I am in possession of a good proposal from Chigundu about Nakivubo drainage channel. Ham points out that the channel is open. It invites people to throw in rubbish. including plastic, feces, and so on, all of which disgust the people around the channel, leading to blockages of the channel. And this proposal shows a fantastic growth. You see, so the man was shown a fantastic plan, and for him he was told these plastics, garbage, feces, and he said, I would rather. He got carried away. And anybody can.
But he could have consulted the technocrats.
Which is what we agree. It is wrong.
Ernest, to help us elaborate on the point, we want to understand the mind of the president in influencing and motivating his decision to identify him as the appropriate person to develop and beautify the Nakivubo channel. Because now, the president, while addressing a press conference, of course, in the midst of his campaign program, said that he will have to study the damage that has been occasioned on account of these floods, and if indeed the government is convinced that it is as a result of the redevelopment, corrective actions will be undertaken. Already, the executive director of KCCA has confirmed in conjunction with the Prime Minister that the government is going to roll out a compensation scheme to compensate the traders for the monstrous loss which they suffered. But the question is, for how long? Because in the event that we have floods happen again, this is in the middle of the rain season. What is the fate, number one, of the environment, of the business community, but also in the wider context of governance?
But let me make some small correction. From what I heard, the Prime Minister did not talk about compensation. The Prime Minister said that they are going to give them something like you would call mabugo. They shall just give you something to help you, but not technical compensation in the sense that they would have to value the property and compensate them.
Really?
Yes.
That
Whatever
makes
that
it
is,
worse.
There was kind of mabugo.
Is that effective?
It's not effective because even while I was scrolling through X about 2 days ago, there's a certain ex-user who was commenting that a friend of his lost property worth 437 million shillings. So if you're going to give someone mabugo, is that enough to compensate for all that loss? Probably he had loans that he had taken out, and that property was, through its profits, are going to pay for that loan. So it would be a slap in the face of majority of business people who rely on this city to make a daily and even monthly living. The problems of Kampala stem from the fact that this is the economic nerve center of the country. A majority of people who want to do business, who want to make their money, come to Kampala, and the problems of Kampala are continuous from even before KCCA became an entity. Even during that time of KCCA, it's just a pile upon pile of problems. Kampala is a city that needs a master plan, especially in terms of addressing its drainage. We very well know that there are two rain seasons in our country. There's a rain season in April, and then there's a one that begins in September. But obviously, due to climate change, you now see rain starting in November, of which even you cannot predict the volume of the rain. Sometimes it comes heavier than other times. So one, we did not deal with the initial issues of the city's drainage just from conventional planning, especially in how water should travel around the city. Then now you have issues caused by climate change, which is not of our doing, it's of a doing of larger powers beyond us. I'm not saying mystical powers, it's Western countries and the heavy industrialization. So you have all these issues compounding. And now the problem with our city is that it is not planned. It's not planned carefully. We do piecemeal efforts. You just focus on one area, then there's outcry about that, then people forget about that, then we move to the next issue until the issue reoccurs. So now the problem with Kampala is that we do not decide to go back to the basics. We have two rain seasons. We now have effects of climate change. How do we make a city that is workable? How do you make a city that, correct me if I'm wrong, but during the day it accommodates 3.5 million people, and during the night it drops about 1 million or roughly. So you have this city that every single person who wants to make something of themselves or wants to provide for their families comes to try and find an opportunity, and the city is not planned to cater for these numbers. There have been proposals to expand the city's borders beyond the current 5 divisions, but that has obviously faced a bit of pushback. But all these should be actively considered, because it's not that rain is going to stop. It is going to come again. I have not looked at the current forecast, but it's going to come again next year around April, then it will come again around September of the next year, and so on and so forth. So the problem with that city is that it is not holistically planned. At most, they'll just maybe construct a certain road when people say that this road is lousy, or they'll add traffic lights at a certain junction. But as a whole, Kampala is not thought about deliberately, because now we talk about the flooding of those buildings, but you also have to put into consideration the fact that our city is built in a wetland. So majority of these buildings are sitting in a wetland, and obviously NEMA has its mandate and so on and so forth. But Kampala as a whole, we're located around 7 hills, and majority of the city is in a swamp. So you have buildings that stand in isolation, buildings that do not have drainage master plans, that do not have any contingencies for when rain comes and it's heavier than normal, of which it most likely does. I remember a time when we were seated here with Prof, and he mentioned there were certain heavy rains around the 50s.
Yes,
that
I think 1958 they say.
Yes.
There was heavy rain.
Yes, and the whole city was flooded. So now that happened then. Now what happens with these effects of climate change, whereby the planet is becoming warmer, and on a certain specific day, it rains consistently for 6 hours, more than it usually does. Even the rain that we receive, it has been reported that this is actually light rain compared to what falls in other tropical regions. If we're to receive the kind of rain that falls in Singapore, wouldn't business completely stop for a whole month? Because there are certain tropical cities that there's no day without rain. It's constantly raining, and we are also in the tropics. What happens when, should I say, that the day comes and it rains heavily? So Kampala needs to be holistically thought about, not in piecemeal efforts of traffic light here, traffic light there. The drainage channel, which has received a lot of rightful criticism. This city needs to be thought about as a whole, and it needs to go back to the drawing board, because it's not like our population is dropping anytime soon. Even with these various cities that are coming up, Kampala is still the heartbeat of Uganda, and it is not going to change for a long time. Even with the Albertine graben and oil and whatnot, Kampala is still where majority of people want to do trade come, and it has to be thought about deliberately, because at the end of the day, majority of people are going to pass through Kampala one way or the other. Even when you're going to the airport, you have to pass through the city. So our issues stem from not looking at things holistically. We look at things in isolation, and I don't know why, but we tend to have short-term memories. There's this disaster that happens, everyone raises their arms, and then we forget about it until the next issue comes up. We should be consistent in criticizing these things. We should be consistent in reminding people that this city needs to be planned for as a whole. We do not just need to plan for one thing and then forget about it. Then again, floods happen, people lose close to $500 million in goods and property, and then we go up in arms. Even that compensation which is being suggested, it's not even an adequate compensation for these people who have lost a lot of property. I mean, these are men and women with children who have families to take care of, who have extended families, who rely on these businesses. If someone loses close to $500 million in property, giving them 10 million is a slap on the wrist. How are you going to take that to a bank who has loaned you that money plus accruing interest? So at the end of the day, it comes down to thinking of our city as Ugandans, not thinking in terms of our isolated.
And making institutions work.
Yes.
Let institutions work.
If institutions worked, I think even the
This
planning
thing
you're
wouldn't have
talking
happened.
about would have worked. If governance was working, then the whole planning you're talking about would have worked. So
Let's make institutions work.
Precisely. It comes down at the end of the day to institutions.
And
Thank you,
governance.
Ernest, for your perspective. Charity, as we wrap up this issue, I want you to share with us your perspective. How do we move on now beyond this? Because we could be staring at a second Chitezi in the making, in downtown Kampala. Because now there is talk of a master plan, which you also alluded to, but we know government has shelved it for the last maybe decade or so. There has been talk of the World Bank being interested in financing the comprehensive redevelopment of the Nakivubo channel, but now we see government has taken another tangent altogether. It has favored a local developer to do the work. So what happens?
Isaac, I think one, government needs to consider what it has been learning over a period of time. I know that government officials have been going to China and they have also gone to Hong Kong to learn on how to manage water systems and heavy channel management, water management systems together with development. Because you see, also for Hong Kong, it is a highly mountainous area. They have even gone to learn how to use cable cars, innovative cable cars. You use a cable wire to move across the city and across the mountain in a very short time. There are buses which also use the same routes. And they are also, now this I'm talking about Hong Kong, but I know that our engineers here have been sent to do this over a period of like 15 to 20 years. They've been going, they've been learning. So now after going and learning and writing some of these things in their documents, what has failed the implementation has been interference from politicians. The first place to start, let Nakivubo channel construction be suspended with the view of reassessing what exactly we want from that channel. I think even Professor was not rejected or did not reject development as such.
No.
Everybody loves to see development happening. That miraculous plan that we saw, you know, that circulated, that this is how Nakivubo will look like at the end of the day. We saw a powerful stadium that was built in Hoima, and we are proud to have that stadium being in Uganda. But as much as we love to see development, can we do due diligence? So first things first, the president must accept that as commander-in-chief, this one has overtaken him just because the master plan was suspended. He needs now to call for that master plan, the Kampala master plan. It exists. It's not like it's not there. It exists. He, as the president, since he's interested in what he was shown on a piecemeal, now he wants to take it forward and see Kampala change, look like these fantastic cities, Beijing. He wants to see Kampala look like Hong Kong. Yes. Now call for the Kampala master plan and call for all the technocrats.
Yes.
Call for the engineers, call for NEMA, call for the judiciary, call for all the technocrats. Have a comprehensive discussion on what can be done. This is what we need to do to go forward. But if he continues and says, let the channel go ahead.
The implication of that would be to discard his godly plan now.
Which is what I am calling him to do.
Suspend.
He has ever discarded very many godly plans.
I mean, failure.
He has had very many people whom he has suspended when he said this one is the one who fell from the sky, this one is going to do this, then he lets go of them. They have been there. So this will not be the first godly plan that he has suspended. He should suspend it for the good of the city, for the good of Uganda, for the good of his governance, for the good of governance of this country, but also for the good of himself as the president who has been here for 40 years. This is the best thing to do. Suspend Nakivubo at this point. Call all the technocrats, bring them on board. Let's see what has been done, what can be done, what can be stopped, because we might go ahead and only cause more problems. So look like we have fixed that place of Nakivubo, and then the whole of Wakiso, the whole of Nansana, all these other places, Namuwongo, are all impassable. Kansanga, Munyonyo, we may end up now having nowhere to be because we just decided that no, let's proceed with Nakivubo, to save ourselves good time, suspend this, get back on track, get the institutions, let's reflect as a city, as a people.
Thank you, Charity, for those viewpoints. Focus on Parliament takes a short break. Do stay with us. We'll see you right back.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back. You are watching Focus on Parliament on Civic Space TV. In this segment, we discuss election updates from Tanzania and the United States of America, and the far-reaching implications they could have for our country's democracy. Let me start with you, Professor, on this one. For long, our neighbor to the south, Tanzania, has been considered as an island of peace and quiet amidst a very fragile Great Lakes region, if you like. But suddenly, we have unprecedented disquiet, so much to the extent that it has shaken the very foundations of the state. Of course, this all against the backdrop of a disputed election where the incumbent, Her Excellency Suluhu Hassan, locked out the major opposition political parties from participating. Casting your historical lenses, what could be precipitating the governance crisis in Tanzania suddenly?
Thank you for bringing in the historical perspective. First of all, the narrative that Tanzania has been an island of peace since independence is wrong.
Oh.
That's the perception, at least.
The first serious civil war after independence in East Africa took place in Tanzania. In 1964, there was a war in Zanzibar. Zanzibar is part of Tanzania. There was a war in Zanzibar, and many people lost their lives. Many people lost their lives in that civil war in Tanzania, where Ugandan participated, by the way, a certain Field Marshal Kelo.
Yes.
So that is not true. Secondly, I think I agree with the statement of Martin Luther King Jr. to the effect that peace is not the absence of war or conflicts or tension, but the presence of justice. I wish I could repeat it even.
Repeat.
That peace is not necessarily the absence of war, but the presence of justice.
So the question of peace is justice.
So if there is no justice, there won't be peace. Last year, last October, not this October, but the October of 2025, I was in Tanzania, in Butiama, at the home of former President Julius Nyerere. We had just gone to commemorate his legacy, and I had the occasion to address the gathering there in the presence of Madaraka Nyerere, the son of Nyerere. I told them openly, publicly, that the challenge of East Africa, because they were arguing that the problem of the rest of East Africa, why they are not united, why they have violent conflicts, is because they don't have a single language. They don't have one language, and Tanzania is because it has one language. I said, no. Rwanda, they speak the same language. They have had problems. Burundi speaks the same language. So is Somalia. And to a certain extent, North Sudan. But they have problems, so it is not the language question. I said, why Tanzania has had this kind of apparent peace is because of the justice, of social justice, that Nyerere introduced in Tanzania under Ujamaa. That's what I told them. Then I went ahead, and they even smiled. I saw even Madaraka Nyerere smiling. I said, but I have heard that you are beginning to have bad manners. That's what I told them. That the bad manners I hear is that you are now practicing exclusion. You are not practicing inclusive development. You are practicing selective application of justice. And you have moved away from the principle of Nyerere, of freedom. And if you don't reverse that trend, I don't know. Since you are beginning to have bad manners. Just 1 year after I had predicted that, it has happened in Tanzania. Therefore, what was happening in Tanzania was not sustainable. You know, to have sustainable societies, people talk about sustainable development, but we can also talk about sustainable societies. To have sustainable societies, you must have social justice. You must have equality, which Nyerere did. So what was keeping Tanzania together was that social justice and equality which he had developed. You know, Nyerere was no nonsense because he practiced what he said, he himself. Because he would line up at the bank to get him money to go and pay school fees for his children. And he never built himself a huge house at home in Butiama until after retiring. It is the Tanzanian People's Defense Forces that built him a house. So once you don't have justice, you definitely, if you have wider equality, you will definitely have challenges. Now, tell me, how would Tanzania have avoided such what has happened? And if they don't reverse it, it will happen again. You know, in Tanzania, they have a law which says that the results of an election cannot be challenged in the courts of law. You imagine now you're going for an election and your results can't be challenged. What kind of law is that one? You, the lawyers, you say, when you are coming up with a law, you are trying to cure some mischief. Those who made that law, which mischief were they trying to solve? That the results of an election cannot be challenged in the courts of law. So Tindiri Rusi, is it Tindu Rusi? Lisu. He said, please, without reforms, we are not going for these elections. He was put in. He was incarcerated. He's a deputy. Now, the man has been in the prison. The other day, the court said, no, not Mboa. There is another one called Heki or somebody like that. He was in a delegation going to bury at the funeral of Raila Odinga in Kenya, in Kisumu area, whatever the case may be. He was arrested at Namanga, and he's still in prison. How on earth, according to African traditions, dare you arrest somebody going to attend a funeral? What kind of extremism is that? And that was not Nyerere. That is not Nyererism. So I think the people who are now in charge of public affairs in Tanzania, the CCM, have reached a point where they think they are demigods. You see, this demigod rule, that nobody can hold you accountable, no alternative view, no alternative, no diversity. All we know is the correct line. All we are doing everything for the good of the country, and anybody else who is not with us is thinking to sink this country down. Now, that entitlement, you have heard people saying that the current presidents want to change, to create a dynasty. Already Mwinyi's son is the president of Zanzibar. And I am told Chikwete has been grooming somebody. But even Suruhu Samia is actually, I am told, grooming his son to take over in Zanzibar, so that at the other time, after 10 years, he will be qualified. You know, in Tanzania, they have got an unwritten constitution. They normally change presidents between Christians and Muslims. But although Christians is not inclusive, because the Christians who have also been there are all Roman Catholics, not Protestants. But anyway, I think what Samia has been thinking of is putting her son in Zanzibar. After 10 years, he bounces back also as the president of Tanzania. But anyway, that notwithstanding,
in a minute, Prof.
the challenge of Tanzania, why it has had what it has had, is to think that we are now living in the African museum. Africa has changed. This is the 21st century. People are accessing through this technology, accessing information. They are comparing their situation with others. You cannot have a law on your statutory books saying that the results of an election cannot be challenged in the courts of law, and you expect people to keep quiet. The new generation, the Gen Zs and others, the boomers and others, are challenging the status quo, and Tanzania had better start moving. Last one statement, Nyerere, when he was leaving power, I happened to be in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania by 1985-86, when he was standing aside after 24 years in power, and they were asking him why he was opening up, because he was opening up both economy and in politics. He told them that in African tradition they have a saying, an idiom, which has got a lot of wisdom, that when you see your neighbor, your friend, having a rough shave because he didn't put water in his beards or the hair, what you do, for you do what? You start whitening your beard or your hair so that you don't get a rough shave. So he was insinuating that actually if everybody in the world is liberalizing and you don't liberalize, by the time you liberalize, you'll have a rough liberalization. So Tanzania had better also open up, because their politics is not opened up. They have officially, legally, de facto, you lawyers say, de jure, in terms of de jure. De jure
and de facto.
De jure, they have a liberal democracy and multi-party system, but in a de facto way, they still are one-party system, CCM.
Thank you, Professor, for your reflections. Charity, I know you have been observing the events in Tanzania with keen interest. As our neighbors to the north, because we are in the north of Tanzania, as Uganda, do you predict a spillover? What are the real-time democratic implications for Uganda?
Actually, in the heat of the protests in Tanzania, Uganda heightened its security. And the CDF even posted and told Ugandans, don't even dream about it. Don't dream about what you've seen in Kenya. Don't dream about what you've seen in Tanzania. Because he knew it is very, very simple to spill over. And half of the people who have participated in the riots in Tanzania are believed to have come from Kenya. That is what the Tanzanian government is saying. Whether true or not, we can't verify until after thorough investigation has been done. But the Kenyans have owned up and said through their online posts that if there be any Kenyan that was killed, instead of burying them in mass graves, bring them and we bury them as heroes at home, because they're helping us to transform this East African region into one sustainable democracy. We have also seen that for the first time, the former president of the United States, Barack Obama, has come out and made a statement about Tanzania and said, number one, if you win an election with 98%, and your opposition candidates were locked up, you should not call yourself a democracy. That is no election. And I agree. Tick. Because what is an election? An election is a marketplace of ideas where the citizens are supposed to independently choose for themselves who is going to represent their views. And the rationale for holding elections is to allow citizens to have a voice on the issues of their governance. Did we see citizens having a voice on the issues of their governance in Tanzania? We didn't. Why? They shut down their internet. They had no way to communicate. Now we have had shutdown in Kampala 2 times in our elections. We have inspired the region. We have inspired many other countries to shut down. After all, we shut down and then later we come back. So even Tanzania picked a leaf and said, nah, let's shut down. But Tanzania had shut down even when Magufuli was coming into power. They shut down the internet. And also when Magufuli was coming into power, another thing that happened is that observers had been locked out. But Magufuli did not lock all his opponents in prison. Also, after the election had happened, Magufuli realized that he had no opposition. He quickly looked for opposition to put in parliament, because for him he had returned a full parliament of CCM. Now this one has returned a parliament which has some few people who are not CCM. So there is a bit of differential. I think Suluhu was not up to the task. She had not been a president before. She did not take her time to study what presidents do.
But she was a vice president.
Being a vice president is a totally different,
4 years?
A totally different ball game. A vice president, you are an escort. You are a signpost. Because somebody is telling you what to do and you are assuming some things. Yes, you have been in governance. Yes, you have ideas on how the governance can run. But here you are the number one.
But she had been a vice president for 3.5 years, almost 4.
Yes, 3.5 years
and Magufuli had not been a vice president even.
She had been a president, but he had been in government before as a minister.
So was Suluhu, who was a vice president.
And he had done a lot of understudy. Suluhu, as a person, is also allowed her emotional part to overtake her governance part. When I say emotional part, to the extent that people are being buried in mass graves because they challenged her on certain things, that is the injustice that Professor has been talking about. That once there is inhumanity, it is only natural that human beings will abhor that inhumanity. Amin ruled Uganda for 9 solid years, killing Ugandans and making them disappear in boots of cars. That is what we read about in books of history. I don't know whether it's true, it's not true, because I have seen people now saying that's not true, but the professor of history is here. He better tell me whether it's true.
No, he was even around during Idi Amin's time.
Is it true people disappeared in boots of cars, or they would be taken by army soldiers in the...
They disappeared and they are disappearing in Tanzania today.
But did people disappear in the time of Amin?
Yes, he disappeared people.
And they killed them?
That's what it meant. You disappeared without trace. Means you were killed.
So you see? And that happened here for 9 years. But you see, there are people who are now saying it is not true that it happened.
No,
but Professor is here is saying it's true, it happened. And I want to believe him because he's an objective man.
But where is Juanuka?
You see? He's now asking some names of people who existed that
time. But also he's a first-hand witness to the history. He says he was here.
No, he was. Idi Amin was overthrown in 79 when I was in HSC.
You see? He survived because had he been on air spaces like now, he would have disappeared. We may have never had a professor like now. But so if that happened to Ugandans for 9 years, Ugandans kept a low profile. Ugandans mourned and cried daily for 9 years. They abhorred what was happening. Eventually, that day came when Amin was taken off. It had to happen in Tanzania. You cannot just wake up and become a dictator. He has told you, Professor has told you, that when Nyerere was president, the most important thing to him was wananchi.
Justice.
Wanasemaje. What are they saying? What do the people say? And they've told you that even when he built the education systems, he wanted everybody to attain education fairly. across from Tanzania. He wanted health care system for every Tanzanian, regardless of your background, regardless of who you were.
And your means to pay.
He wanted food to reach out to every Tanzanian, road infrastructure for every Tanzanian. This governance had to work for every Tanzanian. It's not some Tanzanians were more important than others. That was going to work for them. That is justice.
Charity, in a minute, what is your forecast of the immediate aftermath of this? Do you see a marked change in the governance fortunes of Tanzania going forward?
No, Tanzania is going to go back to war. Mark my word properly. If Suluhu remains there with the same attitude, with the same things she's doing, and thinks she's going to impose a system like what is in Uganda on the people of Tanzania, they're going to go to war.
I don't want to call you a prophet of doom, but that's quite a damning verdict. Ernest, the protests in Tanzania have been largely driven by the young people, in many respects mirroring what happened in Kenya when the young people rose up to challenge the president regarding the what they called as unacceptable tax measures. But it's all governance. That's the context.
Injustice.
Professor calls it injustice. Do you see that happening in Uganda, given that also the largest proportion of our population here are really young people, and we are now in the midst of a political campaigning season? Do you see that being replicated here in Uganda?
Our current campaign season has been strangely quiet. It's actually surprising. It has been strangely quiet. 2021 by now there was a bit of uproar here and there. A part of me believes that probably the international backlash has made us go quiet. But then also there's that aspect, but you have to also take into consideration the fact that youth protests are not isolated. From around 2023 up to now, there have been various youth protests across the, not even across the continent, across the world. There have been youth protests in Nepal, Madagascar, Morocco recently, though the Moroccan protests have been rather quiet because ironically they're led by an absolute monarchy, but the monarch was very receptive, immediately saying that we are going to increase social spending and we are going to add youth representation to our National Assembly. So ironically, an absolute monarchy was very receptive and immediately worked on reforms. Supposed democracies have been slow to it. So there's a consistent pattern across the world, not even just Africa, across the world of discontent amongst young people. And this is because in the 21st century, we have a lot of Gen Z, as they call it. Ironically, the president called himself a Gen Z just a few days ago. But
Which president?
Our president. But Gen Z,
Generation Z.
yes, but Gen Z starts from 1997 to around 2012. So this is a generation of young people who are growing into adults, who are entering the world, entering the workforce, and experiencing inequality. They're saying that the world is not as receptive to their talents as they would have hoped it to be. And I'm not speaking just for Uganda, I'm speaking for the world as a whole. Young people have been told, go to school, work hard, prepare yourself to be competitive, and then they're meeting the world and they're throwing around CVs left, right, and center, but they're not getting called. Even just, I was on TikTok a few days ago and I saw a certain young lady who outrightly walked up to the French president and handed him her CV and said, I worked for the French Chamber of Commerce in Morocco and here is my CV. I want to work amongst your what? Amongst your let me say your
Diplomatic corps.
Your diplomatic corps. And you can clearly see by the time even Western economies, which we assume to be doing better than us, have young people are becoming bolder and actively walking to people older than them and saying, I want a job, give me something to do. It shows there's an agitation amongst younger citizenry. They're noticing that the world isn't working for them. I believe that's even what pushed a Ugandan to become a mayor in New York. Younger people are realizing that we are not going to get anything served to us on a plate. No one is going to give us work. If we want something, we have to fight for it. We have to push and be hard. It's what happened in Nepal and they changed government. It's what happened in Madagascar. They changed government. The previous president fled. what's happened in Morocco and even in Tanzania, except in Tanzania it has had huge backlash and led to horrific crimes against a citizenry for rising up. What we're noticing is that young people, as I've said repeatedly, young people are realizing the world is unfair. And they're realizing that, let me say with the Nepalese example, they're realizing that I have to have family in a certain area for me to have a chance. And that's unfair. In the spirit of social justice, we should acknowledge that every single person should have a shot at different positions within their country. It does not have to be within government. It has to be even in a private sector. And if these issues are not addressed, you will have unrest. So,
and if I can add something there, is that true, there are hardships which are structural in nature,
yes,
which are inevitable in nature, but the young people or all people are saying, let us share the hardships equally. Yes. But you find others are tightening their belts and others are loosening them. You know, when others are tightening their belts because they are becoming leaner and leaner because of poverty, the others are loosening their belts because they are eating and eating more.
Yes. So as even using Prof's example, there's Morocco. I go back to Morocco because I was reading the story and it genuinely surprised me. Their king actively saying that I'm going to increase social spending, and especially in education, healthcare, and also infrastructure. And you're surprised by this as like these people are ruled by a king, someone who claims a divine right to rule, but is acting quickly to address. He's listening quicker than people who are democratically elected. This is surprising. So, if a monarchy is thinking in that regard, what about us with democratically elected leaders? We should have, if anything, us should be thinking faster because their positions are dependent on being voted into power. So, can this happen in Uganda? The thing is, as Prof has reiterated, absence of war, rather peace. Absence of war does not connote peace. If no social justice is considered, there'll be unrest. So using the military to threaten people is not enough. People look at their current situation, they'll say they do not have economic opportunity. Let me even use the most basic example. If a young man is saying that I'm not getting any opportunities, how will I get a wife? How will I start a family? So if he's saying that there's no chance for him to start a family because he has no economic opportunities, discontent arises, and then he realizes it's not me alone, it's the next person and the next person and the next person, and that's how unrest arises. And these are all symptoms that will blow up if no active measures are taken.
Interesting. Thank you, Ernest. Professor, let us now turn our focus to the United States, where the son of the renowned Ugandan academic, Mahmoud Mamdani, Zohran Mamdani, has caused a political upset in US's largest city of New York. And he's been elected to the position of the mayor there. What does this mean for democracy in the wider scheme of things, but more especially for the bilateral relationship between Uganda and the United States, being aware that the father recently has released a scathing work where he has criticized Uganda's leader, President Museveni. The book is titled Slow Poison.
I think the Mamdani effect is going to have reverberations throughout the world. First of all, I was reading this morning somebody comparing, these are big cities in the world. They are very influential cities, London and New York. They are shaping the world. And both of them are now led by people who are supposed to be of color. I think both of them are
South Asian.
South Asian origin.
Yes.
Muslims.
And they are both Muslims. So I think that is positive that at least globally, now some, especially urbanites like in New York and London, are beginning to see that we need international citizenship We need multiculturalism. I think that is kudos to the voters in those two cities. Two, relatedly, I think we have had two forces contesting for political space globally in geopolitics, as you pointed out earlier. We have got forces of privilege and forces of social justice. And forces of privilege have been coming up, have been becoming stronger and stronger. That is what people call the far right, especially in the Western world, in Europe and the Americas. The Trumps and these other Le Pens of France and the rest. They are coming up, but people have been anxious to see how far they would go. But again, when you hear the Labour Party passing, being voted into power in UK, I think I was talking to the Netherlands, I think Netherlands ambassador this week. She was also saying the party back home, the progressives have won. So anyway, there are these two powers balancing each other, the progressives and the reactionary group. And Mahmudan having won in a city like New York on the ticket of affordability, the ticket of the downtrodden, on the ticket of the socially marginalized, on the ticket of the excluded, on the ticket of non-racism. And everybody is listening, is watching Mahmudan. It is going to have an impact on the global scene. I think it is going to inspire the forces of justice to be strong and to come up. That is what I am learning from them. Of course, there will be a pushback from the other forces of privilege. The challenge is that some countries like ours now saying what impact will it have here. Our people here, maybe the Gen Zs are reading many things, but they have, for example, in Uganda, people do not follow this political spectrum. If you asked people, even the educated ones, what does the politics of the right mean, or the left mean, or the far left, or the far right, or the center left, or the center right, they have no clue. Most people don't have a clue. Nevertheless, at least they know that Mahmudani stands for social justice, for the downtrodden, for the excluded, for the marginalized, for the disadvantaged, for the working masses down there. And that is an inspiration. So some of that will filter through to Africa and to Uganda. And the forces of privilege are now jittery, are now anxious, are now worried about what the Mahmudan effect is going to be. So I wish that Mahmudan could, after settling in office, could come here and give us a lecture. Now that he has been spotlighted, even some Ugandans are going to listen to him. You know, people didn't know him, except some few of us. Me, I knew him when he was even 5 years. He was here. He was born here before Mahmudan shifted to South Africa. So,
interesting enough, in 2021, he had a comment about Bobby Wine's run for election. It's a very
and he's a musician also.
Yes.
For the information of the listeners.
Because of
he's also an artist.
Mother is also an artist.
The mother is an artist, a filmmaker. But what the moderator is asking us is the Mahmudan effect. So the Mahmudan effect is not going to be only in America, in New York only. It is going to be in the Western world because they are all listening. It is going to be even in the Middle East about this racism of Israel versus the Arabs. It is going to be in Africa. So the Mahmudan effect, or the Mahmudan coming into office and everybody tuning there and then being resisted by not only Trump and the Republicans, but even the Democrats, these forces of privilege. You know, within the Democratic Party, there are also forces of privilege. So I am glad that the forces of social justice led in America, not even by Mahmudan, but by Ben Sanders, the one-time Democratic aspirant, by Ben Sanders and others, is taking center stage. I know that there is going to be a backlash from those racists, those supremacists, and those privileged classes, even here in Africa. I know they are going to be jittery. The privileged forces, they are taking keen interest, and they are trying to find a way of damage control. But my take and my last submission here is that that effect of Mamdani is going to have reverberations here, even in our region, since everybody is listening now on social media and whatever to what is happening in America. I wish they could understand more. There could be more of you who are in the civil society. You could raise more of the consciousness so that those people who are defined by the values of social justice can take on those people who are defined by the values of privilege, so that we can see politics in those two lights, not in where, which tribe, which religion, which party you belong to, but we can be very clear about socials of forces of justice versus forces of privilege. Lastly, by the way, even in the USA, the voting around Mamdani and the rest these days is not necessarily around the Democrats per se, because you could see, is it Chomo? What? Komo. Who was a Democrat, and for that he was even a governor, was also leading forces of privilege. But the forces of privilege have been overwhelmed by the forces of social justice, and that is what I like about the Mamdani effect.
Charity, how do you assess Mamdani's chances of success, given that he's now up against very entrenched
forces of privilege?
Forces like Professor is highlighting, no less the President of the United States himself, who has vowed to contain him.
So Trump, first and foremost, has been totally challenged with these mayoral elections in the United States. And I am extremely excited about what I have been seeing, what happened in Virginia, has happened in New York, and a lot of the cities around the United States. Status quo has been overturned 100%. And Zoran, one, he had two great barriers, or three. He jumped. The first one, he's a Muslim. And you know that the United States has had all these wars in Iraq,
homophobia,
all these wars everywhere, chasing for weapons of mass destruction against Muslims,
Islamophobia,
and all these things, because they are the ones who are bombing and they are the ones who are causing all this. So, first barrier, and a major barrier even to the ordinary citizen, because they have been psyched to really believe this is true. Zoran jumped that barrier. The second one, that he did not denounce his Ugandan roots at even any one time. Even in the heat of his campaign, he took off time to come back to Uganda and even took a picture, happy day here, and it was posted. And he took another one with Kadaga, for which he was criticized. How could he stand with a person who was anti-homosexuality, whatever, and they tried to pull him down, you know, he's not inclusive and all. But the three issues that Professor has outlined about him caused him to fly over that second barrier of being from an African state, a migrant going to lead the United States' biggest capital and financial city, the New York. And those three qualities are social justice, equality, and activism. When Zoran had just graduated from university, his first thing to deal with in New York City was the housing injustice. That's where he started. That everybody had to have average housing no matter who they were. And that marked him as a distinguished leader in his community. He was already building a political base for himself. So for Trump to wake up and say he's going to contain him, how? It is a ripple effect. He's already had a good campaign that touched the hearts of the people and harmed on original things that affect them as human beings. Issues of inclusion, issues of equality, issues of justice is what he has been promoting. So Trump can't contain justice. America itself talks about justice, talks about social justice, talks about these things here of equality. Their whole constitution from beginning to end is equality. So how do you contain a person who is promoting equality? Where do you even start to say, I'll contain you? He tried to deport immigrants. Now here is a person who came, and meanwhile for Zoran, they wanted to just call him an Asian, of Asian origin, and didn't want to mention Uganda, and he kept insisting, I was born in Uganda. I'm so proud of him. I don't know, the day Zoran comes to Uganda, I must find a way of seeing a 34-year-old who's made history, who's changed it for us, because that is it. He is our identity. For me, from a Ugandan perspective, despite the Mamdan story of President Museveni and himself, they were bush war friends. They started in 1970. They had conversations, and now he's telling him about slow poison. If you have a friend who you've worked with from 1970 and is telling you that, look, for 40 years now, you're beginning to get slow poison, maybe it is time for you to reflect on a few things that this friend of yours is telling you, but not take it out onto the governance spectrum. We have more opportunity in Zoran than it is for government to think that they're also going to take on the Trump attitude of contain the father and contain the father's slow poison. What we need to look at the young man for is, how did he even get to win the mayorship position? What gave him all this momentum that they've called it an Obama moment of 2008? You know,
yes, we can.
Barack Obama, halfway into the campaign of Zoran, said, I took my time to listen to your campaign slogans. I took my time to listen to your messages to the people of New York, and I am convinced you can be a president of the United States. Imagine that. That he could see values within that young man that connected with what he believed when he campaigned to be the president of the United States. And he told him, I'm going to make sure I support everything that you have done until the day you are announced mayor. He was. One of the happiest people right now is Barack Obama and that whole team that has been working against all this Trumpism. I want to call it Trumpism. And for Trump, it's about time he also realized that the globe has changed. There are certain things you can harm onto or harp onto and go away with them, but there are those you can't. One of them being racism. The other one being that you feel you're more superior than other people. That ended long time ago. Once innovation came up, and then we have the internet, and then we have communication across the globe. We became one global village. We have Americans here. We have Americans everywhere across the globe. So it is so easy for anyone, anywhere, to also say they are immigrants wherever they are. Americans in Uganda would be immigrants. So would also have a right to deport them. But everybody has a right to stay everywhere they are staying, because we became one
they are legal.
global village. So I am so happy for Zoran. He is our ambassador. And for me, we should look at the opportunity. The opportunities in making Uganda, Kampala look like New York. How do we pick lessons from Zoran to help our country grow?
To benchmark?
Yes, apart from this TikTok man who said that Zoran is going to run down New York and make it look like this. No, actually, Kampala is going to learn from New York and become a city which looks like that. We can grow our tourism. There would be more opportunities for us to learn, more young people who can go to study, universities opening up exchange programs between Kampala and New York. We have our man on the seat. Let's take advantage of what it is. Kenya took advantage of Obama. They've never looked back. We can't look back, not now. God has made it for Uganda. We head on with Zoran.
Thank you, Charity. Ernest, how big a moment is this for the ordinary Ugandan youth watching you in terms of Zoran's mutually cries to the US's, which is of course the foremost democracy in the world? What should the Ugandan youth, as a takeaway, take from this moment?
I am not going to directly reference Zoran, rather Mamdani, the young. I'm going to reference his father. I had the privilege of reading his book, I think, last week. And then
Which one?
A slow poison. So the first few chapters that struck me was when he was talking about how he landed in the U.S. He said I was just a young man fresh from finishing my secondary school education, and I was seeing the US service at the time that was on Bombo Road advertising for further education, and that's how he landed on. He applied for it. He was applying for a friend as well, but his friend never came for the interviews. He came for the interviews, and one thing led to the next. He went to study engineering. He found it uninteresting. Ended up in social justice after being one of the freedom riders during Martin Luther King Jr.'s time. And what I saw from there is that any young talented Ugandan with just a shred of ambition can change the world for both those who come after them and for next generations. Because I mean, Mamdani, the father, just landed in the US when he was a young man looking to change his own life, and then one thing led to another. He got exposed to left-wing politics. It fundamentally changed him. He taught his son these politics, and his son is now the mayor of the largest financial center on the planet. So it is those small things that have a trickle-down effect, which show us that any young person, any young Ugandan with a shred of talent and with just some ambition can change their fortunes and change the fortunes of many people after them, if they're willing to look long term. I can say that any young Ugandan, you could come from any circle or anywhere, just showing ambition and showing that and showing vision that I want to do this, and I want to see what can come of me, can change their own fortunes. And that's what these let me say this current election, let me say in the US, has shown us that let me just mention any district. Let me say a person who comes from rural Bugisu or whatnot, but shows talent and then continues to HSC and then is picked up and then decides to go for their further studies and then gets exposed to different perspectives and comes back and uses it to try and change their society one way or the other. This does not strictly have to be in politics. It can be in commerce. It can be in business, commerce and business as I said. It can be in commerce. It can be in.
It can also be in financial growth.
Yes, it can be in financial growth. Small things, and that's essentially what I picked up from his mayor run. I did not pick it directly from him, but I saw it in his father's journey. His father's journey resembles a lot of young men's journeys, and I'll also say young women. It resembles a lot of young men and women's journeys. Just one person who said that I want more for myself. Let me see what the future holds, and one way or the other, they come back with the ideas that they have learned, and these ideas influence multiple other people. And that's essentially how life works. One person who is willing to see bigger than everyone else, and then what they see influences everyone else that comes after them. And it also shows that we live in a global village. Because if just a young man in the 60s picking ideas from the United States influenced his son who has gone on to run in the largest financial center on the planet, and tell them that, look, there's more to life than capitalism. We also have to look at the common man. And that has and many working New Yorkers, because ironically he actually even won Manhattan, which is the financial nerve center of New York. Many people thought that he'd lose this to the governor, to the governor and the Republicans, but he won it. Of which the people who voted him were also young professionals who said that I actually align with what he's saying. This city needs to work for everyone. I don't need to move out of state to live. I want to live within this city and make it work. And that can also reflect on us. We can also run politics of social justice. So politics that says that I am privileged enough to live in Kampala, but I want also the next person who lives in a rural area to also have the chance to come here and compete favorably for opportunities. This city doesn't need to have floods every now and again. This city needs to work for everyone, from the businessman in downtown Kampala to the corporate man sitting in uptown Kampala in an AC controlled room. This city needs to work for everyone. So what we can pick from him is that we need broad-based politics that caters to everyone, not just the privileged who drive the most expensive vehicles, but even the young man with a dream to make his life better and subsequently to make the life of everyone else everyone else around him better.
I must appreciate you, my panelists, Professor Mwambutsya Ndebesa.
But can I give just in 1 minute some book references for the young people to read
Please.
on Mamdan? Yeah, if you want to be immersed in this politics of social justice, you could get hold of one of Mamdan's books and read. There was a classic politics and class formation in Uganda, which used to be our main text when we were at university. Then there is from citizen to refugee. Then there is citizen and subject. Then there is bad Muslim, good Muslim. It was on Darfur. Then there is when victims become killers. That was a book on Rwanda. And then there was one on Makerere University, Scholars in the Marketplace. Those are some of his references that you can read and get involved in politics of social justice.
Thank you, Professor, for those reflections. Many thanks to Ms. Charity Ahimbisibwe and of course Mr. Ernest Talwana for your collective able participation on today's edition of Focus on Parliament. Many thanks to you, our viewers, for watching and for your time. Many thanks indeed to the production department for keeping us live on air. Our esteemed viewers, we urge you to follow our social media platforms. We are on X, we are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, and you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow the proceedings of this show. We'll see you next time.
You forgot TikTok.
TikTok, oh yes, TikTok for the Gen Zs. We'll see you next time. Be blessed.